Welcome to this special edition of Catholic Focus from Edmonton, Alberta. We are doing a series on end-of-life issues, and my guest today is someone for whom the topics of euthanasia and assisted suicide are very close. Mark Pickup. It's so great to finally meet you. We've sort of met on cyberspace.
Yes, we have, and now finally face to face.
Face to face. Now you live with multiple sclerosis.
I do.
Tell me about that.
I've lived with it for 33 years now. I was diagnosed in 1984 at the age of 30. Mm-hmm. It was a huge shock. I can remember waking up one morning and I couldn't feel anything from my waist down. It's like I had a spinal anesthetic. I could walk okay, but I just couldn't feel anything. Yeah. Couldn't feel hot from cold or sharp from blunt. And went to the doctor, and he thought I had a pinched nerve. And so he sent me off for some physical therapy. I can't remember what it was now, but some sort of therapy, and it went away. And then 2 years later, I got it again. And by this time I was 30 years old, so the first one was when I was 28. Yeah. The second one at 30, and same thing, numb from the waist down. And so I went to my physician, and he again thought it was a pinched nerve. But then overnight I lost the use of my right arm. At that point, everything changed. They initially thought it was a brain tumor, but eliminated a number of other things. And at that time, 30 years ago, it was really the elimination of other things. And eventually you were only left with MS. And so they did what they called a lumbar puncture, where they looked for certain proteins in the spinal fluid. Mm-hmm. They know what healthy spinal fluid looks like, and they know what MS looks like. And so the diagnosis was MS. It was as though somebody had kicked me in the chest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because you were so young, because you thought, what's my life going to be? Sort of what was going through your head?
There was a small thing that happened 2 years earlier. When the first time that I got the numbness, that was during the 1982 recession. Yeah. And there wasn't a lot of jobs around, and I was out of work. So I spent, my daily job was out there beating the pavement trying to find work. One day I got home from my daily job search, and my wife said, this fellow called from some organization. They wanted to come in for an interview, which puzzled me because I didn't remember sending them a resume. But I had no other job prospects, so I went in. And I can actually remember sitting in the waiting room wondering what this numbness in my legs was. So I went into the interview, and it was the strangest interview I've ever had, despite me telling them I knew nothing about the disease that they were representing, and despite me telling them that I probably wasn't the best person for them. They offered me the job at the exact amount that I knew I needed to feed a wife and 2 children. Yes. And they offered me the job of Client Services Coordinator for the MS Society of Edmonton. Really? And I can remember looking, and I could see this resume on the desk of the chairman of the board. And so finally, curiosity got the better of me, and I said, can you tell me where you got that resume? And he said, it's the strangest thing. We were moving our offices, and the movers came in to pull out the filing cabinets. And we heard this thunk. You're not going to believe this, but give me a Bible, it's true. Yes. He said, we heard a thunk on the other side of it, and I reached back, saw it was something, and I brought it was her resume. And we looked at it and said, he's got the stuff, the sort of skills we need. So they looked up my number and information and called me. Apparently, at a number of years earlier, I had applied for the job of executive director of the MS Society, and I don't know, somebody was filing them, and my resume fell off the back, and there it sat for 5 years. Wow. So they had this old one, and that's what, in fact, was their basis to give me the call. I took that job, and I saw the very worst of MS. I can remember there was a woman, she was 42 years old. 6 months into the diagnosis, she was already wheelchair bound. Her husband said, I don't need this stuff, I'm out of here. Really? And he took their only daughter with him. So there she sat, it was just her, and she wanted to die. And I can remember, all I could do was look at my shoes. But I saw this stuff all the time. There was a dad came in, and his 18-year-old daughter, she was bedridden with MS, and then he came in to talk to me, and he said, I hear about remissions. She's going to have a remission, won't she? She will, won't she? And I couldn't guarantee that. Chances are, yes, they will, but they don't always happen. And it was a good thing I didn't say anything, because she was wheelchair bound at 9 months, bedridden at 12 months, blind at 18 months, dead at 2 years. I saw this stuff every week.
So you knew what was in store.
I couldn't take it. I quit that job after 6 months, and I went to the cushy federal civil service and went on. And then I didn't have this numbness for the 2 years. Shoot forward those 2 years, and that comes the time when the diagnosis happened.
Right. So for people who are not familiar with the disease, tell us a little bit about what it does. It's neurological.
It's a neurological disease of unknown cause. It's incurable. What happens is the nervous system, well, every nerve is coated with a fatty tissue called myelin. And what happens is, for this unknown reason, the body attacks that. It thinks it's a foreign substance, and it attacks it. What happens, of course, is the myelin swells, and it cuts off part or all of the message of the nerve.
Okay.
Then when the swelling will go down, you may get your movement back, or the function back. But with each time that it swells, it begins to scar, thus the word scler. And what happens is it'll happen throughout the body multiple times. So you have multiple sclerosis.
I get it.
And as time goes on, it begins to scar, and those scars create plaques, and those plaques are permanent. So what may in fact manifest itself as an episodic disease where you have attacks and remissions, you find that usually with each attack you get less motion when you come out. 30 years ago they had no way of treating that. The best they could do was symptom management, try to bring down the swelling with steroids and that kind of thing. Today they have some very good management tools to medications. Still not a cure, but some very good medications we didn't have back then.
Yeah. Now, you said obviously you lose motion or movement. You could lose eyesight, for example. Is there pain involved?
Well, there is. You mentioned the eye. There is what they call, with neuritis, there is very often eye pain. And when I had neuritis, yes, there was pain. It hurt to move your eyes, that kind of thing. So how it manifested itself with me is I would go to bed at night not knowing what function I would wake up with or without. And the disease was so wild. It was so raucous. It was up and down, up and down. You know, I'd lose the ability to walk, get it back or part of it back. I would lose the use of my right arm and get it back. That was important to me because I was an artist.
Of course.
I was also a musician. And as I say, my eyesight was affected, sensation was affected, bowel and bladder function was affected, speech and hearing was affected. And hearing doesn't very often, but it did with me.
Yeah.
And I can remember, just short story here, that about, this was maybe 2 years into it, I suddenly lost my speech, and I was just basically frothing. I couldn't say anything, no one could understand anything, and I was so embarrassed by it. I was sitting in the darkened family room, I wouldn't even turn on the lights. And a fellow that lived about 3 doors down, he was a carpenter, his name was Wally. He came over to visit, and he came down into the family room, and he sat there and he simply said, I don't know what to say, but I just wanted to be with you. You know, that man, just by his presence, gave me more therapy than any psychologist or therapist could have done. The point being, it is absolutely crucial that we be with people in their suffering. We walk with them.
Yeah.
Even if you say nothing, not even to be afraid of silence itself.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that story up because that's what I've heard, that, you know, I mean, you're my friend, all of a sudden you have this thing that I don't even know what it is, I don't know what to say to you, I stop calling, I stop visiting, and what you need is my support.
Yeah, and that's true. There's an old song that I'll paraphrase, that it wasn't the friends who were unkind, they were just hard to find.
Yes, yes.
I can honestly say that not one friend that I had back then do I still have. I have a new set of friends. And to be kind to them, they didn't know how to deal with it, so they didn't deal with it. Yeah. They just stayed away. The Mark they knew was healthy, he was athletic, he was
mobile.
Yeah. And this new man wasn't that.
No, no.
And so they couldn't deal with it, so they didn't deal with it.
So you're diagnosed with this thing, your friends are not visiting anymore, you're obviously depressed.
At about the 2 to 3 year point, my sorrow was so deep, my heartache so sharp, that my thinking became clouded. And this is a segue into a really important point, that when people's judgment is clouded, when their grief is so profound, that is not the time to be starting to make decisions. You always make bad decisions.
Of course.
If I had not been surrounded by the love of my wife, my faith community, and my God, I may have taken my life at a low point.
Mm-hmm.
But I never would have known my grandchildren if I had done that. I have 5 wonderful grandchildren. They love me and I love them. And I never would have known them if I had made that choice back then. You see, the point is, we do not know what tomorrow will bring. The grief that was absolutely intolerable and unacceptable yesterday becomes tolerable today and becomes acceptable tomorrow.
Yeah.
Do I wish it was different? Absolutely. Do I wish I was back the way I was? Yes. But that whole point is it hooks into a grief process that we must go through, and particularly when you're dealing with something like adult-acquired disability.
Yeah.
The mark that was is gone, as surely as if he died. There is, if I'm willing to accept it, if I'm willing to cross this river of grief. Grief is like a river.
Yeah,
it
yes.
cuts through our lives. It'll cut through everyone's life. Everyone will be affected by grief. You may be going through grief now, or you may have gone through grief, or you're about to go through grief, or you'll go through grief in the future. But you will grieve. And how you respond to that grief is critical to your humanity and to who you are and how it affects those around you. If I had chosen suicide back when my grief was at its worst, it wouldn't affect just me. It wasn't a decision, an autonomous decision of Mark.
Yes.
It always affects other people. It would affect my wife, my children, my grandchildren, my doctor, because I'll ask her to stop being my healer and become my killer.
Yes.
It'll affect my society.
Yes.
By helping to entrench the notion that there is such a thing as a life that is not worth living. I do not have that right.
Yes.
That brings us to a point of autonomy.
Yes.
That is the new ideal. Everybody wants to be autonomous. I am my own destiny. But you cannot have autonomy and also have community. You cannot have independence and also have interdependence. You must choose. You can't have up and down, hot and cold at the same time. It is one of those either or things. You can either be I, me, mine, and my autonomy, and that's all that matters, or you can be responsible to the community and even posterity, the future.
Yes.
If I decide to kill myself, it will put in peril those who are yet to come. I do not have that right. I still have a responsibility to the common good, to the society in general. We are not autonomous. We are interdependent. Words like family, neighbor, community, nation attest to the fact that we are interdependent, not independent. We need to get away from this notion that I am autonomous. You know, John Donne had a very famous quote. And you may remember it. He said, "Never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee." That the death of any individual affects me because I'm part of mankind. This is what he was getting at, is that we're not, and part of his quote was, "Every man is a part of the continent, a piece of the main.
Yes.
Any man's death diminishes me because I am part of mankind. Therefore, never send to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee." That's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
We are not independent little islands.
Yes.
We are part of a whole.
Yes. Yeah, and I mean, you've touched on all the issues here, from autonomy, freedom, support, grief, suffering, control. The law in Canada will probably change.
It will change.
It will change. Even the fact that we're having this conversation, and you've been, I mean, the law is changing now, but you've been an activist in this area for many years. I've known about you for 12 years. Yeah, how does this make you feel? You're a person who lives with a disability. Here's the law saying that
October 2012, the Parliament of Canada gave unanimous support to the idea of a national suicide prevention strategy, and that included our current Prime Minister, who gave that his full support.
Mm-hmm. So you mean suicide
prevention strategy.
Yes.
They gave that the full support. What happened to it, we don't know yet. But that they gave support. They thought that was worth supporting. Not more than 18 months later, the Supreme Court of Canada again gives unanimous support to the idea of assisted suicide for people with disabilities or sickness or conditions.
Yes.
So let me get this straight. If you're healthy and you're able-bodied and you're suicidal, you get suicide prevention.
Yes.
If the sick or the disabled are suicidal,
we help
they
them.
get death.
Yes.
Not only do they get death, we'll help them do it.
Yes.
That's the kind of society we're in now. Whatever happened to equality? Whatever happened to universal human rights, where we all stand equal before the law? Because what someone like me sees is my country is saying is that my life is worth less than the able-bodied and the healthy person. And not only that, the polls show that 80% of Canadians agree with it.
Obviously, you don't agree with that. Obviously, you find value in your life. You find dignity and worth in your life.
This is madness.
But how do you have that conversation with you're a person of faith, you're a Christian, you're a Catholic.
Yes, I am.
Some people are not. How do you have that conversation with someone for whom they just can't, I get my dignity from the fact that I'm a child of God.
I talked a minute ago about autonomy versus community.
Yes.
It does not take a person of faith to realize that we may have rights, but we also have responsibilities. Yes. Do you want independence and autonomy? Because another word for that is the jungle, the law of the jungle. It doesn't take a person of faith to understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
My worth comes from the knowledge that I'm made in the image of God. And so is everyone else.
Whether they believe it or not, yeah.
Whether they believe it or not, it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah, yeah.
And it is an enlightened society that lifts up people
Yeah.
when they're at their lowest point and they've ceased to believe that they have any value, especially then. Mm-hmm. That is what enlightenment is. It isn't killing each other. Mm-hmm. We want to get away from that. Mm-hmm. The violence of autonomy.
Yeah. There's so much we could be talking about, and it's so personal. Obviously, for you, everybody has disabilities. I suppose we can make that argument, but I'm not disabled. I don't have a chronic illness. I don't have a terminal illness. It could not be even on my radar. There's so many Canadians that don't even know that this is happening.
Okay, let's talk about something else that's really important to talk about. The freedom of conscience, religious liberty.
Yes.
This new regime that's coming in is going to require doctors to either participate or refer. Mm-hmm. Referring, you're still complicit in the murder, aren't you? Mm-hmm. Medical killing is something that we deplored. It was something that happened in another time. My father's generation fought to stop that kind of a regime. We're moving in that direction and not a shot's been fired. Mm-hmm. We have to understand that when people are suicidal, we have to come beside them. We have to become community. We have to help them search for life with dignity. Oh, incidentally, let's talk about death with dignity. That's a big one.
Yes, yes.
Now, let me tell you something about death with dignity. It is not found at the end of a needle or in poison. Death with dignity, it has been my experience, is the end result of having lived with dignity. It is a process, not an event.
Yeah. And obviously you find that you're living your life with dignity.
Even though at one time I thought that could not be so.
You thought that. And through the help of your support of your
community,
community, your family,
community of other people,
your doctors.
My doctors, people who lifted my value up even when I doubted my own value.
Yes. Yes.
They allowed me to say some very outrageous things, and they understood that pain can make people say unthinkable. But they didn't hold me to a death wish that I might have sought if I had been at my lowest point. Happily, I didn't do that.
Now, you obviously live with this disease. Your condition will likely get worse.
And there will be people who say, look, this poor man, he doesn't even have quality of life anymore. That's by their standard.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something about quality of life. When I was 25, if someone had said to me, within a few short years, you will be in a wheelchair, you'll lose your health, you'll lose your career, I would have said, there's no quality of life in that. But yet today, at 63, my life does have quality. Why? The standard for quality of life changed. Today, what gives my life quality is to love and to be loved, and to think I still have a contribution to make, however foolish that thought may be.
Maybe in closing, Mark, what would you say to that person that is struggling with this? Maybe they're alone, maybe they have a chronic illness, maybe they're in pain, emotional or physical, social. What would you like them to know?
First of all, there is a God of love. A God of love that desperately wants to know you. He is there for you, and there is help. We have wonderful agencies within the church that will seek to help return people to a life with dignity when they don't believe it's possible anymore. There is a community waiting to embrace you. It's there for the asking.
Yeah. People like you, thank you. Mark Pickup, I don't think of you as an activist, but I guess you are a disability activist. You're a man of faith, you're a blogger. You can read all about Mark's adventures, if I can call them that, at his blog, humanlifematters.org.
Yep.
And you're always posting new things. Mark is also available at events and speaking, and he is part of the Every Life Matters series that is being sponsored by the Archdiocese of Edmonton, which is why we're here. It's been a great pleasure meeting you in person, Mark.
Good to meet you too.
Yes, thank you very much for what you're doing, and let's pray for each other.
Good, thank you.
And that's all for tonight. If you have any questions about this topic, it's a very important topic, or any topics that you might hear on this program, be sure to send us an email, focus@saltandlighttv.org. You can also reach out to us via Facebook and Twitter. I'm Deacon Pedro. Thank you very much for being with us, and we'll see you next time on Catholic Focus.